Are there unique aspects that you think are associated with product thinking as related to journalism, say, as compared to other types of software development?
So I think there's something really interesting in dealing with journalism product, which is that you're dealing with both an industry that needs to earn money, but also one that believes in social good and the idea of trying to make people's lives better through a better society. A lot of technology is focused first on how can we make enough money to return our VC's investment. And while there are some journalism outlets that are owned by hedge funds and so on that are trying to create those returns, there's generally a concept within journalism of we are here to try to inform the public because of the social benefit of doing journalism. And what that means is that some of the metrics that you're trying to measure are harder to measure. It's much easier to say, did someone click on this? Yes, no. It's much harder to say, did this change someone's life? Yes or no. Did this improve somebody, the way that they act? Yes or no. Did it change their mind? Yes or no. And these things are very hard to measure, and people also are not very aware of them. You could put did this change your life? Yes, no, at the bottom of an article, but the results are probably not going to be reliable in a meaningful way. So understanding impact and understanding what it means to have that kind of impact requires a very different kind of thinking. And sometimes some of these measurables are either intangible or are very long-term and slow. So there is some work going on in this area, especially from the Center for Investigative Reporter has an impact tracker. I know that Chalkbeat cares deeply about impact and how to track it, and there are others who are trying to understand that. But there is something different about creating products for a social good as much as you are for a pure financial or engagement return.
And what do you think the skills are that a product manager or somebody who needs to work in a product environment need that are maybe different than a typical journalist or editor?
So I think that on the one hand, there are similarities in that a good journalist will listen a lot, will be a very good listener, very good at taking notes and understanding the bigger picture, and the same for an editor as well. But I think that one of the key differences as well is that product is never finished. An article is published and then you move on to the next article. Product is a constant cycle. It's a constant cycle of trying things and then seeing if they work and being able to measure if you're getting what you expect to happen, and then coming back to it again and revisiting it and rethinking it. And so software is never done in the way that a paper is actually printed. Of course, in the same way that a journalist's beat is never finished either. But it's much more the idea of saying, okay, we're constantly iterating, we're constantly trying to improve, and also sometimes your feedback is much more direct than it would be as a journalist, because you're able to see the impact of what you're doing. You're able to measure certain aspects of that, and you're able to see whether or not it works or not. So you get to try and test your ideas much more in a product space than you tend to in a journalistic space. But the general concept of I'm trying to understand what is happening here and what is the narrative, I think the journalists make for very good product managers, in fact, because they're able to create the kinds of stories that I described. As a commentator, I'm trying to do this. As a journalist, I'm trying to do this because of this. And being able to listen and compile that information to know which are the right stories to do. I think that those kinds of skills are complementary. So I've seen a number of my favorite product managers are people who transferred over from journalism for that very reason.
So if a journalist, or say a journalism student, media student, wants to move into product management, do you have any advice for them?
I would say to think about what is it that you care about, what is the change that you want to bring about, and how do you feel about your role within that. As a journalist, you can be a lot more working solo. You can come up with an idea, you can go away and research it, deliver it to your editor, make your edits, and be finished. As a product manager, you're working much more closely with a team, and you need to understand the strengths and weaknesses of that team and be working closely with people who are going to be doing the delivery, because that's probably not something you can do, or even if it is, it's not something you'll be asked to do, because your job is to make sure that everybody is understanding what happens, everyone is able to communicate with each other, and you're able together to manage through any problems and deliver what you're trying to do. So I think that if you're looking to make that transition, really think about what is it you bring to the table as a collaborative person rather than just as a solo talent, because that's really what you're going to be asked to do a lot more.
And just to wrap things up, how do you feel about the future of the commenting space? Where do you think this is going forward, especially now that you're in your new home at Vox?
Sure. So I really have a lot of doubts about platforms that operate at scale. So the scale of Facebook, the scale of Twitter, we're seeing all kinds of issues that are coming from that. I'm speaking to you now in late February when one of my colleagues at The Verge here at Vox Media just brought out the other day a long article about Facebook moderators in this country and the difficulties of moderating at scale. I really believe that decentralized communities are much more powerful, much more likely to be successful, and also less of a target for trolls who are trying to have a mass influence. And what I mean by decentralized is really saying, this group has this community right here, and here, these are the rules, and this is what we're going to talk about. If you want to talk about something else, go find another community somewhere else. Now, my fear is that ends up happening only in closed communities like single WhatsApp groups, which means they're not visible, not accessible, very hard to engage with, very hard for people to join and participate in that conversation if they're not already in it. Our hope is that by using the kinds of tools that we use and we create around decentralization, we're able to say, no, here we talk about this, here are the rules, you break them, you go somewhere else. And that by doing it in that way, it's much more manageable, it's much easier to moderate, and the community itself is more able to participate. So for us, we believe in decentralization and then more experimentation within this space. To paraphrase Cookie Monster, the comments are sometimes food. And so really understanding where do we put comments and where don't we, instead of trying to put them on everything at a scale that we can't manage.
So continued experimentation and innovation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing where the Coral Project goes next.
Thank you so much, Cindy.